If you want to become the conscious creator of your reality and master your ability to create your reality and your experience, then you really need to understand the dualistic nature of will. Dualistic meaning there's a polarity of two opposing examples of will. What do I mean by that? So I spoke yesterday in the video that I shared about how you can view reality and review timelines from either the perspective of the individual self, the micro view, or from the macro broad self or broad view, which is looking at the collective co-creation of reality that we are sharing together. This also applies, this shift in perspective, this shift in the breadth of view also applies to will. What we are all doing as we move through life, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, is deciding between operating from a personal will or aligning with the divine will. The personal will is the individualistic choices that you can make that will be the solutions or the answers that the choices that you make based on how will this choice affect me and how will I gain or how will I benefit, without stopping to contemplate or consider the effects of your choices on others. The other option, the divine will, is taking that broad view and instead making decisions and making choices as you move through life from the perspective of how will my choices affect the whole? How will my choices affect the collective? What is the collective impact that this choice will have? What is the benefit or what is the cost on everyone? So it's a process of actually transcending the belief that you are separate from everything else. Because in the individualistic viewpoint, that is occurring at a state of consciousness where you believe yourself to be separate from the consciousness of everybody else or the environment or the external reality. And it's that separation of believing that I am only seeking to fulfill my own needs. That is the lie that we are transcending and evolving out of, where we realize that actually, if I am divine consciousness and everything in my reality and everyone in my reality is this same shared divine consciousness, then the impact I have on other people or the impact I have on the world is actually an impact that I am having on another part of me. It's another aspect of the one mind, the divine consciousness that is emanating as everything in existence. This is where things in your life can radically change. When you make a conscious and determined shift to move from moving through life and making decisions based on your individual cost benefit analysis, and instead just even setting the intention and voicing the desire to say, I wish to start aligning with the divine will, the divine blueprint, what is in the highest outcome for everybody, including yourself. This is how we transcend the limitations of self-serving behavior and instead evolve into fulfilling and experiencing our true divine blueprint, our divine purpose. Let me explain why that's important. Every soul inside of the shared reality is created with a design that would play perfectly into the shared tapestry of what each person has been built to bring to the world. So think of this like being a piece of a puzzle. Each soul is one puzzle piece, and the divine blueprint is that perfected state of the puzzle where every single piece of the puzzle fits perfectly in the exact right position, and the puzzle is complete and the image is in its perfection. That is the design that we have all been made in coherence with, in perfect harmony. The problem is when we incarnate and we come into this reality and we forget about that divine blueprint that we've been created holding, we've been created in harmony with, and we start making decisions based on only my individual opinions or benefits, then we start distorting from the divine plan, from that perfection. And those distortions are created and projected out into reality as suffering and as misalignment, as scarcity or pain or illness. So we basically have this decision between when we pursue our individual will, the consequence of that is that suffering is created. However, when we make the declaration and set the intention and the desire to say, to the best of my ability, I want to live in alignment with the divine plan for us all, then we start to navigate towards an experience of that divine blueprint in its perfected state. There's also a key point to realize here, in that shifting to divine alignment for the highest good of all beings, that it would be easy to interpret that as having to somehow sacrifice something that you really want, as though you're having to deny yourself your own personal wants and needs in order to instead have some bigger, loftier goals of, oh, world peace for everybody. And that is the misconception that I think it's natural to perceive, to think, oh, I have to deny myself if I want to operate for the good of all. But that is actually a lie. Let me explain why. It's the same way as thinking about if someone is being selfish, then we would use that word to describe someone pursuing their own needs without considering the impact on others. And the logic of doing that works while we're in the illusion of the separation. But in fact, by pursuing this, it's almost like an illusion of a zero-sum game, while you allow yourself to think that, well, I want to make this decision because I benefit, and I'm willing to do that even if there is a cost to somebody else. That's the zero-sum game of, one person's gain is another person's loss. That is actually a false illusion, because with the understanding of the oneness of all consciousness, as the entire reality is all within the one divine mind, the individual who makes the selfish or self-serving decision is in fact inflicting suffering not only on the other, but also on themselves. In this way, the selfish act or the self-serving act actually becomes a lose-lose situation. It's not a zero-sum game. The individual doesn't actually benefit. There is a perceived benefit, but the cost is actually greater to them, to that individual, because of the pain and the suffering that they are experiencing on the soul level, on the multidimensional level, of having deviated from their own true nature. Because the true nature of every soul is unconditional love for all, is in divine alignment. So the suffering to that individual is felt in that soul as well. It's not just an external suffering to somebody else based on their loss being my gain. So what we are really faced with when we boil all of this down, and this dualistic choice that everybody is making, either on a conscious or an unconscious way, making decisions that are appearing as self-serving, are buying into an illusion of separation from others and an illusion of a personal gain that is actually not really occurring. There is a personal loss, a personal suffering that is created to that individual as well as to the collective. So where we continue to make decisions from our own personal agendas, we are not only creating suffering, but we are deviating from the divine plan, the divine blueprint, that perfected puzzle that we were built to be a part of, and we were created to perfectly play a role within that puzzle. The alternative then is to say, I surrender my individual will and my individual agenda, and I wish to align with the divine will, which is the highest good for all beings, including myself. In this way, the divine will actually also becomes, paradoxically, service to self, because the divine will and divine alignment is a win-win. Everybody wins. You win because you're aligning with your soul's purpose and your soul's blueprint and who you were made to be and what you were made to bring, and bring as a service to the world, to other people. And everyone else benefits because you are making decisions and creating timelines and contributing to the shared co-creation of this collective reality, increasingly in alignment with what you are here to contribute. And other people are going to benefit from that. And we create an increasingly loving environment and an increasingly loving reality as we remove these layers of distortion of personal will, which is the lose-lose situation, and we move increasingly into the win-win choices, where not only the individual making the decision wins, but also the collective are also benefiting. This realization of the illusion, of the lie that the selfish act actually is in any way desirable. It becomes a scam. Once you can see through it and see through the illusion, see through the lie, you realize, oh my God, this is something that we had all at times been guilty of indulging in. And that in many ways is a part of the learning experience that we signed up to have by coming here. But it was never really what we thought it was. What it was sold to us as, of, oh, I benefit if I make a choice that serves me, actually was only creating additional suffering. That suffering is then what is being manifested and generated into the suffering of the reality that we experience and that we share. Everybody is harmed by that. Everybody suffers by continuing to perpetuate and exist in a world of suffering. So this is the real choice. Are you going to continue in your exploration and your learning path of the pursuit of individual will and individual agenda, which is creating suffering and perpetuating fears and perpetuating the belief in separation from others and from reality and from the divine? Or will you make a commitment, make a declaration to say, I wish to move into a reality where everybody experiences a harmony, everyone experiences the alignment with the divine blueprint that we were all made with. That is the beauty and the innocence that we all hold within us and that we all have the opportunity to experience together. Just by simply making that statement, by saying out to the universe, saying it in a prayer, write it in journaling, just by simply saying, okay, this is a commitment that I want to live my life by, that will have a radical effect on your consciousness, on your energy levels, on the divine guidance that is going to be able to come through to you into your conscious awareness, and the timelines that you are generating into the future. Simply having the intention, having the desire, and making that conscious is going to have a magical, radical effect on our shared reality, on our shared future. This is how we heal the future. We heal it from the now moment before we reach it. We shift the timelines, the field of time, into something increasingly loving and peaceful and harmonious and joyful from the now moment. This is the power that we all hold. This is the awakening process that humanity is going through right now. The awakening to the fact that you are the divine consciousness, and so is everyone else. We are all divine avatars of one mind, of one being, of one awareness. Earth, in many ways, as a planet, has been playing the role of an incubator, which has been caring for and nurturing the eggs before the chicks hatch. And we are in that moment of hatching into the awareness, the realization of ourselves as fractals of divine consciousness. We are the creators of our reality. And with that awareness, we can build a level of mastery of determining the future and the experiences and the world that we want to live in together.